Our second speaker tonight is the Honourable Irwin Cotler. Irwin is, of course, a current Member of Parliament, as James mentioned. He was first elected to the House of Commons in a by-election in November 1999 with 92% of the votes. A stunning electoral victory by any standard, I'd say. He was re-elected in 2000, 2004, 2006, 2008, and most recently in 2011. And in 2006, he also won with the highest Liberal majority in the country. On December the 12th, 2003, the Prime Minister appointed him Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, and he was reappointed to that position following the general election in 2004 and served in that office until the general election in 2006 when, as you know, the Liberal government was defeated. He currently serves as the Liberal critic for Rights and Freedoms, International Justice, and is the Vice Chair of the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on International Human Rights. Excuse me. As Minister of Justice and Attorney General in Canada, he helped transform the face of the judiciary through the appointment of two outstanding women justices to the Supreme Court of Canada, Mesdames Justice Rosalie Abella and Louise Charon. It was an interesting change in the composition of our court. He is a professor of law emeritus at McGill University and is the recipient of no fewer than 9 honorary doctorates. He has testified as an expert witness on human rights before parliamentary committees in Canada, the United States, Russia, Sweden, Norway, and Israel. He gives plenty of lectures around the world because of his expertise in international law, and he is going to offer to us now his views on who is Canada's best Prime Minister. Mr. Cotler, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Peter, for those very kind words of introduction. May I say that you deserve a commendation for your recent publication of the best of the Speaker's rulings, which will be a landmark precedent not only for parliamentary jurisprudence but legal jurisprudence everywhere. So thank you for that, Peter. And, Brian, I want to say that I'm delighted to be here as the guest of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. I share with you the notion that these two are not only great Canadian heroes, but represent the best of what Canada is and what we can aspire to be. And I have to say, when I heard Jim's comment with regard to Sir John A. Macdonald, it was a very persuasive speech, and in the spirit of bipartisanship, I intend to join him with respect to that nomination, not only because of John A. Macdonald's vision, and not only because of the practicality of his politics, but because of the particularity of what Jim mentioned, which should never be forgotten, that his incredible capacity to overcome adversity and to thereby serve as an inspiring role model across generations, and really as an incredible role model of what one can aspire to do, notwithstanding the personal and very painful adversities in one's life. So I want to say that was an outstanding presentation, and I have to say I concur not only in the spirit of bipartisanship but in respect for your excellence in presenting it. I must admit that I was tempted to choose one of the 3 prime ministers with whom I worked and knew. Prime Minister Paul Martin, in whose government I served, and but whose important contributions were nonetheless regrettably abbreviated democratically. Jean Chrétien, an homme de peuple, a real man of the people, who my colleague Stéphane Dion nominated in a previous gathering of this kind, and Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who was an academic colleague, who was my MP, representing Mount Royal, and whose enduring legacy was the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which has had a profound impact not only on our laws, but on our lives. But I've decided to nominate Lester Pearson as my favorite, if not the best, Prime Minister, whose principles and politics, if not politics of principle, impacted on me as a university student very profoundly in the late 50s and early 60s at the time, and whom, I might add, emerged as the overwhelming first choice in a recent poll in 2013 by a panel of 30 leading experts as Canada's best Prime Minister. But when I was listening to Jim, I think that same panel should revisit Sir John A. Macdonald after hearing your remarks this evening. But I have chosen Lester Pearson not because he was a landslide victor in a poll, but for his landmark achievements, international as well as domestic, and the enduring legacy which he bequeathed to us through his transformative leadership as Canada's 14th Prime Minister in 4 distinct areas. The first for his leadership in matters of foreign policy, multilateralism, and conflict resolution. Admittedly, Lester Pearson is best regarded and much respected for being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1957 for his role then in resolving the Suez Crisis, notably by proposing a UN peacekeeping force at the time. This alone makes him perhaps our most decorated Prime Minister, reflecting his ardent advocacy for peace and multilateralism and being a force for conflict resolution throughout his time in academe, government, in the civil service, and as a diplomat. At the same time, and perhaps less well known, Lester Pearson was also a soldier statesman who served in the Canadian Army Medical Corps and the Royal Flying Corps during World War I, a diplomat in London at the start of World War II, someone who was there at the founding of the United Nations in 1945, at the founding of NATO in 1949, and Minister of External Affairs while Canada fought in Korea. As Pearson himself said, and I quote, "Every state has not only the right, but the duty to make adequate provision for its own defense in the way it thinks best, provided it does not do so at the expense of any other state." Moreover, as regards the Arab-Israeli conflict, of which the Suez Crisis was but a part, Pearson described his understanding of it at the time in a prescient way that remains central to this day. He wrote in his memoirs, and I quote, that a solution to the problem was impossible without the recognition of a Jewish state in Palestine. To me, he wrote, this was always the core of the matter. Interestingly enough, recently when Prime Minister Harper visited Israel, and I was in the Israeli Knesset's parliament at the time that Prime Minister Harper addressed the parliament, and the Speaker of the Israeli Knesset, Yuli Edelstein, got up, and in addition to praising Harper, he began his speech by saying that for him, Lester Pearson was an architect of the creation of the State of Israel. And he cited that particular statement that I just quoted from today. In fact, I learned about this statement when I heard it quoted in the Israeli Knesset at the time. And also from my late mentor, one of the great international law professors of the 20th century, Professor Julius Stone, who spoke of Lester Pearson from his perspective and understanding of international relations as being a great architect and advocate for peace. On the domestic front, Pearson's achievements can be measured not only by their considerable merits, but also by the fact that so many of them endure to this day. They are inextricably bound up not only with our governance and our manner of governance, but also with our national identity. For instance, Pearson's government pursued a strong social justice agenda, establishing the Canada Pension Plan, the Guaranteed Income Supplement for low-income seniors, and being an architect of Medicare, which according to a 2012 Leger poll is considered a source of national pride by 94% of Canadians. In the matter of national identity, and reference has been made to this, Pearson also gave us the flag that has come to symbolize a modern, united Canada, and that, incidentally, as we all know, we are, I think, daily proud to see flying so frequently these days in Sochi at the Olympics. While also laying the groundwork for several subsequent initiatives of great importance, Pearson concluded the Canada-US Auto Pact, which was the forerunner of North American free trade. He established the Royal Commission on Bilingualism and Biculturalism, recommendations of which led to the adoption of the Official Languages Act in 1969, and which the former Dean of McGill Law School, F.R. Scott, who was my law teacher at the time, spoke of it as making an enduring contribution to Canada's national identity. Indeed, as Alain Gagnon of the Université de Québec à Montréal put it, and I quote, "Lester B. Pearson is surely the Prime Minister who contributed the most to bringing English Canadians and French Canadians together." Indeed, all of Pearson's accomplishments, both domestically and internationally, were underpinned by not only his politics, but rather his principles of governance, and characterized by an inclination and skill in bringing people together for the common good. He was, after all, never at the helm of a majority government. He governed very often through chaos and confusion, as well as a numbing succession, if we remember, of petty scandals at the time. But as history settles, what remains are the great achievements, both domestic and international. The most compelling being, and with this I move to a close, perhaps his capacity for going across party lines, for reaching out across party lines in order to secure his great legislative successes and more. In particular, he placed a great deal of emphasis on cooperative federalism, convening many First Ministers' conferences and practicing what has been called the Pearsonian model of a partnership between Ottawa and the provinces. While his skill as a builder of consensus and welder of principle enabled him to achieve successes internationally as well as domestically. In this spirit of overcoming differences, may I leave you, and this is where Jim and I come together, both in terms of Sir John A. Macdonald and Lester Pearson. May I leave you with Lester Pearson's vision of what Canada could become, a place where, as he wrote, we live together in confidence and cohesion, with more faith and pride in ourselves and less self-doubt and hesitation, strong in the conviction that the destiny of Canada is to unite, not divide, sharing in cooperation, not in separation or in conflict, respecting our past and welcoming our future. In a word, a great Canadian Prime Minister and builder for the ages. Thank you.
Que de contributions remarquables, mesdames et messieurs. I want to thank our special guests for this evening, James Moore and Irwin Cotler, and of course, Peter Milliken for being honorary chair for a fourth year in a row. And let me say, by the way, and I know James Moore has touched on this, but I want to add my own voice to it. Let me say how much all of us who care about the quality of our elected officials were saddened to learn of Irwin Cotler's impending retirement from Parliament. His graceful presence and courageous stances, particularly in favor of human rights worldwide, has been one of the great adornments of the Commons. And I think it would be entirely appropriate for us to take a moment and applaud this extremely distinguished and honorable political career. I would like once again to thank our sponsors, Intuit, Spectra Energy, the Certified General Accountants, Shaw and iPolitics. Remember that you too can be on this list of sponsors for the asking next year for what is now one of the premier social events in the Ottawa social calendar. I'd like to acknowledge the leadership and support of our board of directors with special thanks to our chair, Rob Wildeboer. Rob, raise your hand. Who traveled from Toronto to be with us this evening. Many thanks to the MLI staff who've worked so hard to make this event happen. Walter Willett, Patricia Bouchard, Pamela Louie, David Watson, as well as our volunteers, both student and parliamentary interns. I'm a former parliamentary intern. Every year we ask some of the interns to come and lend a hand, which they happily do, and I thank them for it. I also want to thank my wife, Shelley Crowley, who's right there, for her commitment to Emily and this soiree. And if you like the cookies in the gift bag, they are entirely the creation of her and her catering company, the Queen of Cups. We made at our house over 1,000 cookies. You're welcome. And of course, a special thanks to all of you. It's a great day to reflect on our flag, our institutions, and our great political traditions. We hope to see you all again next year.